Oh, hello! It's that time for another video, huh? Oh boy, here we go. At the time of making this video, we are about a month away from the release of a new game, Into the Pit, and also about a week away from the new Tales from the Pizzaplex story. This in conjunction with the fact that I eventually want to cover Midnight Motorist and the Fredbear plush in their own theory videos, I've realized I can't exactly do that until I finally establish my view on the whole book continuity debate. How should we view Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex? These stories take place in the same continuity as the games, or are they just all parallels? I know there are people out there that will never change their opinions on whether the books are in continuity or not, or even read the books. But going forward, just try to keep an open mind to what I'm about to say. Does anyone here like Star Wars? Trust me, I have a point to this, so just stick with me. In 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilm and acquired the rights to Star Wars. Part of Disney's plan for the series going forward was to make sure that cross-medium storytelling in things such as books or comics remained consistent and canon to the main series of movies, essentially saying, hey, if you buy this book, your time's not going to be wasted if the next movie comes out and retcons everything, because that's not going to happen. With this move, all previous works outside of the main films and the Clone Wars series were labeled Legends. Still stories from the world of Star Wars, but no longer in continuity. Sound mildly familiar? Since then, the Star Wars books and comics in relation to the movies and shows have actually done a pretty good job at adhering to what it set out to do, but it hasn't been perfect. Three specific examples come from the Ahsoka novel, the Thrawn trilogy, and the Canon comics. Ahsoka has some continuity discrepancies with the final season of Clone Wars, but even more so in Tales of the Jedi, where Bail Organa meets Ahsoka far earlier than initially implied, the design of the Inquisitor is completely changed, and Ahsoka's Force abilities are outed in different ways. The Bad Batch changes Kanan's perspective on Order 66, and Tales from the Empire establishes that Captain Pellaeon was acquainted with Thrawn far earlier than in the trilogy. These are all pretty drastic contradictions, but guess what? Despite all of that, the books are still labeled as canon. Pause. I guess I should probably explain why I keep saying continuity instead of canon. The way Scott treats everything in FNAF is that anything released officially under the FNAF license is considered canon, but isn't necessarily in the same continuity, such as the movie, Silver Eyes trilogy, and the Fanverse projects. The way literally every other franchise treats that word is that they're interchangeable. Continuity and canon pretty much mean the same thing. So going forward, I'm using canon as the word because saying continuity is annoying. So you see where I'm going with this? Now, obviously Star Wars and FNAF are two very different brands. FNAF's entire thing is basically try to fit every last piece together. So we've been kind of programmed to assume everything has to fit together super cleanly, and if it doesn't, then just discard the whole thing. Or at least that's how it was. Cue Mr. Hippo.
Orville, not every story has to have significance, you know? Sometimes a story is just a story. If you try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy. I had a friend do it once. Wasn't pretty, we talked about it for years.
The series has changed since Ultimate Custom Night, and while theorizing is obviously still prevalent, with mysteries still needing to be pieced together, it's not as prevalent anymore. Piecing absolutely everything together at once with every new game release is not the main driving force anymore. The series has genuinely made an attempt, honestly starting with Sister Location, to also be more narratively driven, with J-Top himself saying some mysteries just don't have answers yet.
Do you know if there's any mysteries about Security Breach that have not been solved yet?
Yes.
There are?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. There are things that are, maybe not paid off yet.
Yeah.
Oh. There are things that may happen in the future.
We aren't meant to solve absolutely everything the same way we were before. The Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books are series with their own overarching plots, with some admittedly weird stories attached. But some stories are just stories. Seriously, who cares if Fazgoo exists? Is that seriously going to affect your enjoyment of any of the games? It's just another wacky story out there in the universe. You don't need to fit it into a timeline. If you haven't gathered by now, I believe that most of the Tales and Frights books are canon to the games. But it's not that simple. I understand the detractors with claims of continuity issues and it just being too complicated, and to a point, I completely agree. Looking at all of FNAF as some giant story with all of the games and books is too much. It becomes weighed down by its own lore. Scott said this himself with the Silver Eyes when it came out. But I don't think we should look at all of it as one giant story. For example, I personally like to break down everything into phases. Phase 1 is the Scott era, 1 to Ultimate Custom Night. Phase 2 is Fazbear Frights, the story of the Stitch Wraith, overlapping with Phase 1 and some setup for Phase 3. Phase 3 is the Steel Wool era, Help Wanted 1 to now. And Phase 4 is Tales from the Pizzaplex, with the origins of the Mimic, including some backstory for Phase 3 and heavily overlapping with Phase 3. And if you want, Legends is the Silver Eyes. Phases, different eras of FNAF, still having overlap and informing one another, but telling their own stories. Sometimes messily, but that's cross-medium storytelling for you. And I'm not saying you can't cross-theorize between everything, but it's easier to look at all the pieces individually, then try to weave everything together, and adjust accordingly if you see a problem. If there's something blatant and in our face we should connect the dots for, it's usually made pretty clear, such as the Curse of Dreadbear being so FNAF 4 themed, or the Fredbear posters in Security Breach, or the FNAF 6 location being in the Pizzaplex. Then, yeah, of course connect those dots. I did that with the red door for the Pizzaplex and Fredbear's. I even still think using narrative parallels in theories is totally fine, such as Mike and Cece with Step Closer and then Henry and Edwin. But that doesn't mean that characters can't coexist, a great example being, jumping back to Star Wars, Anakin and Luke. Two people from Tatooine taken and trained by a Jedi Master and have to face a Sith Lord that offers them the choice to turn to the dark side. Parallels, but obviously the same timeline. Impulsive Evan did a video on this exact topic recently. So yes, while I view it all as mostly in the same continuity, I do still treat the books as very much separate from the games. They aren't one and the same. The games will always take precedence as the original medium the series started out in, even if something is presented first and differently in the books. You can still treat the books separately, but you can't ignore them. And now with my viewpoint on the franchise as it stands out of the way, we come to this. What do I think changes story-wise for the games if most of Frights and Tales are canon? Well, the story is affected in two ways, mainly coming from Frights. First off, William is like 99.99999% most likely dead before anything Security Breach related, so Burn Trap is probably some form of the Mimic, either the same one we see at the end of Ruin or a different branch. And second, Andrew is 1000% the Vengeful Spirit, the one William should not have killed. Now, I don't think he's Golden Freddy. That's going to be a topic I'm going to address in my Fredbear plush video whenever I get around to that. I still believe Cassidy is Golden Freddy. I really like the interpretation of Golden Freddy's role in UCN that Cheddar Doodle put out there, so seriously go check it out if you have the time. So with Andrew being the Vengeful Spirit, obviously there's some questions. When did they die? Are they a secret MCI victim we haven't heard of until now? Is that why there's 6 bodies in Into the Pit and Toy Chica the high school years seems to be saying there was a hidden victim? Well, real quick, I'm going to address the high school years. I always interpreted the Foxy hook in the backpack as crying child's death at the hands of Mike. The Foxy Bro, thus starting William down the path of murder. But maybe it is trying to imply a 7th victim. I'm honestly not sure. The fact is that the idea of the one you should not have killed was only introduced in Ultimate Custom Night, so any evidence we could try to look for in the games is probably pretty sparse. Scott could have seeded something about it in maybe Midnight Motorist, but remember that Ultimate Custom Night wasn't a guaranteed thing at the time. We were either getting an Endless Tycoon mode for FNAF 6 or Ultimate Custom Night. The concept of the Vengeful Spirit could have been thought of during the making of Ultimate Custom Night, and that would be a final mystery for the original series to solve later in the books. Well, a final mystery besides Midnight Motorist. For the love of everything Freddy, can there please be some kind of connection to Midnight Motorist in the new Click Team Racer game? That would be like the perfect connection. And as far as Into the Pit showing 6 dead kids, it could just be symbolic of Charlie because it's pretty clear that the whole revisiting 1985 event is just some kind of agony vision. So it could just be blending William's actions all together, or it could be showing Andrew. You see, both examples really could go either way, which is why I totally get people getting frustrated and just wanting to write the whole thing off. Personally, I seriously think that Andrew just may be a victim we never get a full backstory on. Besides the fact he probably had to already be attached to William for FNAF 3 due to the line,
"No matter how many times they burn us."
He's an undocumented event in the many years of William's misdeeds that comes back at a crucial moment to royally screw him over. And that's all he needs to be. I would go as far as to say that's the point of Andrew. He's the one unaccounted part of the Planet Pizzeria Simulator, the one thing nobody took into consideration. We may get more on him one day, after all we are getting the Into the Pit game and the Return to the Pit book, but for now I'm satisfied with this. Maybe this is just how I view the franchise. I've always felt that if something feels unsatisfying or unsolved now, some point down the line, it's going to be answered or make some amount of sense. Like, for example, what happens between the story The Mimic and the modern day Pizzaplex we see in the books and games. If you've read the books, you do know they give us some answers about the Mimic, but they leave a notable gap in the story that feels like a perfect time frame to maybe explore one day in the games, maybe in Fall Fest or something else. You see, the books don't answer everything, they just give a bit more context. I want to end the video with this, though I doubt many of you are this far in. As someone who didn't accept the books as canon at first either, even with reading the books, you do not have to read the books if you do not want to. Heck, most of the fan base doesn't even play the games. But do not hate on them because you listen to a poor description of the books or just because they aren't games. If you've read them, then yeah, there's obviously stuff there to criticize. Not all the stories are great or well written, and especially the later half of Frights kind of dips in quality. But at the same time, the books offer so much value to the series. We wouldn't grasp so many concepts nearly as well, such as Remnant or Agony, without them. We get one last hurrah for Afton, an actual answer to the one you should not have killed, learn who GGY is, and get a really awesome and tragic backstory for the Mimic. There is the odd story here and there, In the Flesh is ew, but then you get some really beautiful stories like Coming Home and The Real Jake. I am so happy to have these books, and the good, personally, far outweighs any bad they could have brought to the franchise. But obviously that's just my opinion. Please feel free to leave your thoughts or viewpoints down in the comments. From either side, your reasonings for thinking the books are in canon or out of canon. Oh, and here's a little extra thing. What's your favorite Frights or Tales story? Off the top of my head, my favorite story from Fazbear Frights probably has to be Coming Home. I always really appreciate whenever they give us a different angle on the MCI, like they do in the Silver Eyes with Carlton and his speech about Michael. If the video hasn't already come out, I should be reviewing the new Tales from the Pizzaplex story as soon as I get my hands on the new book, because Walmart is being kind of a pain in the butt right now. But I'll see you again then, or sometime after. Bye everybody!